Okay, we're talking about our waters here. I can still remember when I first started wilderness survival, and you're in a survival situation, and they tell you that the best way to purify your water is to boil it. And I can still remember asking the question, well, if I'm in a survival situation and I don't have a pan, how do I boil water? You know, it's a question that comes up in a lot of my classes when I teach it. Well, if we don't have a pan, how do we boil water? And basically what we're going to show you is a technique that the Indians used to use all the time. They even used to cook their food and stuff with this technique. It's called rock boiling. And the rocks I like to get are the real smooth rocks, like these. And the reason why is because we're going to toss these into our hot part of our fire there. And the really smooth rocks end up not grabbing as much of the ashes that are there when you get a smooth one. Now, whenever I teach a class, I always ask the question, well, where is the best place to go get your smooth rocks? And somebody will raise their hand and they'll say, well, right down at the bottom of the street. And I say, that is a good spot to get your good smooth rocks, but if you're going to rock boil, you cannot, this is a warning, you cannot get your rocks from anywhere where it's wet. Because what happens is these rocks, even though they're real dense, they still have teeny tiny little holes in them. And if they're sitting in the water over a long period of time, they'll end up, the water will go inside, work its way in there, and it'll get in there over a long time. And so then when you throw them in the fire, now what you want to try and do is get these things so they're actually pretty much red hot. Okay, that's the best thing. Now you might not be able to get them red hot, but that's what you want to try and do, is get them as close as you can. And when you get them that hot, that water that's in there will actually turn into steam. When it turns into steam, it's going to want to try and get back out. And if it can't get out these pores, which it won't do, then what's going to happen is, after a while, this rock becomes a grenade that blows up. And when it blows up, if you're standing over your fire, those pieces go just like a grenade. And it could kill you real easy. So you cannot get your rocks from anywhere where it's wet because they will explode. The guy that got me started, he was making a sweat lodge one time and went and got some rocks and threw them in his fire and was overworking on the sweat lodge, and they went off. And when they went off, there was trees around his fire, and they embedded themselves in those trees. And they're there for a reminder that you just cannot do that. So, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use rocks to boil water. And I like to get several of them. And we'll end up tossing these in the fire, and we'll end up getting them red hot as close as we can. And then we'll yank them out of there. Now, what do you do for a pan? Well, there's a couple different things you can use. You can take a log and you can hollow it out with your knife or a hatchet. You can do that. Or we can do a process called burning a bowl. And this is a bowl here that I've burned. But now when you go to burn a bowl, you want to try and get the stuff, the softer type woods, you know, like your poplar, even your pine and stuff like that. If you get the hardwoods, this is a piece of oak here. The hardwoods tend to dry out when you burn them, and this I actually burned so that I could process seeds and nuts and stuff, and I've done some acorns in here already, and you know, if I had corn and stuff, I could crush it in here, and so that's what this was made for. So I wanted a harder wood, but you get some of the others, you can actually burn a bowl or a cup, and then you can use that. Now that takes time. Another thing you can do, the Indians, most everybody's familiar that they used to have a birch bark canoe. And they used to make cups and pots and stuff out of the same techniques that they used to build their canoes. And this is birch bark here. And I'm thinking of actually making a birch bark pot. And well, I am going to make one, and what we'll do is we'll go ahead and video the steps, and so that you'll see all these steps. But basically, you use this, you turn your bark inside out. You kind of clean this, and then you have to cut it a certain way and fold these up, and then you punch holes in it. And these right here, you can even see a little bit of them here. This is the spruce root that you get from the forest, from the evergreen trees. And those roots are what they sewed everything together with. And they sew this together with that, and then you go out into the pines and you find some of the spots where the tree got damaged, and it'll weep that sap out and it'll become resin, pine resin. And you get that pine resin, and what they used to do is they used to mix bear fat in with it when they melted it. And what that would do, because if you use just the pine resin by itself and you put it on here, it'll work, but it's just as it cracks just as easy as what it does when it's on the tree. It's just as brittle. So if you use animal fat in there with it, then it makes it more ductile and it won't crack as easy. So you end up melting that in and sealing all these up with that. And so this is my birch bark cup. And so what we'll do is we'll actually do some rock boiling in this, and we'll go ahead and use these rocks, and I usually toss several of them in there, and so then we end up dragging as many out as what we need to get it to boil, and we leave the others in there, and then when it starts to die down, we rotate them. Now, I just talked about using wet rocks. Well, if you got some wetness on the surface of a dry one, it doesn't have enough time for it to get in there. Plus it's hot enough, it's going to keep that evaporated off anyway. So I usually rotate them out, and when you go to boil water in a survival situation, you can you want to boil it long enough so that you know that everything in it is dead. And the nice thing about boiling water is that it will kill all the 4 bad boys that get in water. And so how long do you boil? Well, you can get these charts, and if you're at sea level, they tell you boil for 3 minutes. And if you're on top of Mount Everest, then you're going to boil for 10 minutes. And then depending on where you're at sea level wise as to how many minutes you have to boil. And if you don't know where you're at, I got a good rule of thumb, and that rule of thumb is to boil for 10 minutes, and then you know you got it. And so what you'd end up doing is rotating your rocks. And a lot of times you get it boiling, and one rock will keep it going for 4 or 5 minutes easy, and so then a couple more, you got your 10 minutes. And so what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and get our rocks in here and get them heating up. And I'll go get some water in this, and then we'll come back when we've got our rocks hot enough. Now I want to talk too about tools, and in a survival situation, and I've used these, as you can see. You would use these to scoop your rocks out. You got one with a hook, and here just happen to have 3 of them. Sometimes you use just 2 to get your rock in there, and you hook it in, and then you drag it out that way. And these tools work pretty good. I'm going to cheat a little bit in this demonstration, and we're going to go ahead and use a pair of tongs. This gets a little quicker and easier for me. So we'll get our rocks in there. As a matter of fact, I'll go ahead and place a couple of these in there right now. I might try some down in there and see if we can get those up there. Try down here. I'll have to reposition myself. We'll end up getting these heated up. We'll get some water in this, and we'll show you guys how we can actually boil water by using hot rocks. Okay, we got our rocks in here, we got some water in our pot, and if you look down in here, down in our fire, those are pretty warm right now. There's some down in there in the bottom. We're going to try and snag one of these out. We'll put it in here, we'll see how many it takes to get this thing boiling. And I'm going to have to do this quick because it's hot on the hands as well. So see how red these get. We got some bubbling going. There, we got a roll going a little bit. And it snagged up. This one. There. Now we got a roll of oil going. Lost track of another big one. Now we're still rolling. And that's how you rock boil. That's going to boil pretty good there for a while. I got another big one in there. So, anyways, that's how you rock boil.